We'll just congregate after 5 minutes, I'll just ask my team. Excuse me, have you got Aparna on the line? She's on the line, right? Yeah, Aparna, can you hear us? Aparna, okay, lovely. Aparna, lovely. Just give me 5 minutes. We'll start in 5 minutes. Rajiv is already here. Shweta is already here, and so is Insia. And we'll just take a 5-minute breather because I have to co-moderate it with Neha. And my throat is a little dry, so I'll need to have a little bit of water. So I think we've got all our panelists together here, and I have to read the profiles of my very eminent panelists, so I need my reading glasses on. Okay, the reason why we did this panel as ethics and sustainability is because we believe that sustainability is, in simpler terms, trying to do things in a way that the future generations are not deprived of the fruits of the environment that we're enjoying. So it's called as an intergenerational equity in the sphere of international environmental law, where you are equitable to the future generations. That is what sustainability is all about. And sustainability is basically political, social, and economical. So from that angle, we'll cover our 4 panelists today. We've got one panelist by the name of Aparna Roy, who's participating from Delhi. Aparna, can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely. Loud and clear, Swapnil.
Okay, lovely. And we've got 3 panelists who are going to be seated here with me and with my co-moderator. So first I'm going to ask my co-moderator Neha Ranglani to come up on stage and occupy the seat. Neha Ranglani is an integrative nutritionist and an expert in functional medicine. Other than that, she's an executive committee member of the Council for Fair Business Practices, that is our organization, and she's going to be co-moderating this panel with me, and she is a very, very capable speaker, a very, very capable moderator, and a very brave woman. I'll tell you the reason why she's brave. Because the topic that is there today is not her topic, and she still ventured to co-moderate it along with me. Now that is what I call bravery. I would not have even 1/10 of that bravery if I were asked to moderate something which I did not know about. Now, being a professional lawyer, I read a lot. That's the reason why I know about these things. So that's why and as president, I have to moderate it. Otherwise, I would really, really leave these kind of topics to other experts if I had them on hand today. But be that as it may, let me introduce my panelists one after the other. I'm going to introduce Mr. Rajiv Gupta. He's also our advisory board member, and he's the managing director of Upward Capital Limited. It's an M&A investment bank which was founded in 2012. Prior to setting up Upward Capital, he was a global partner at the Carlyle Group, and before that, the joint managing director of DSP Merrill Lynch. He has an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and a BTech from IIT BHU, and it's ranked, his organization Upward Capital is ranked among the top M&A advisors in India, and some of his best deals are advisor to HDFC on the merger with HDFC Bank, Tata Steel on acquisition of Bhushan Steel, Vedanta on demerger in 6 listed entities, HDFC with Guru Bandhan Bank, and VIP shareholder controlling stake to be given to multiples. So may I please welcome Mr. Rajiv Gupta on the stage, and please take a seat. Now the next person in the panel is Shweta Arya Serene. She's a seasoned transaction banking professional with over 17 years of work experience in the field. She currently has the trade and working capital sales team at JP Morgan India, managing key corporate and F1 relationships for the business. Prior to joining JP Morgan in 2019, she spent over 10 years with HSBC, primarily in trade finance sales across markets, and she holds an MBA from IIM Kozhikode and a B degree from Ramey Institute of Technology, Bangalore. Shweta, could you please come on stage? She's also a part of our advisory board. I'm going to introduce Aparna Roy, who you see on the screen. Aparna Roy is our advisory board member as well, and Aparna is a fellow and a lead climate change and energy at the Center of New Economic Diplomacy. She is part of the Observer Research Foundation, which is possibly the best think tank in the country, which works very closely with the Prime Minister's office and also works with the Foreign Minister, Mr. Jaishankar. Across the globe, they have a couple of offices. And her research focuses primarily on the politics of climate change, resilience building, and environmental governance. She was a coordinator of G20 India's Think 20 Secretariat's Task Force on Refueling Growth, Clean Energy, and Green Transitions. She is a guest teacher at the Schareit University at Berlin, where she teaches an advanced module on interactions between climate change and social determinants on health. She is also a member of the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India's Consortium on Economic Analysis of Air Pollution Policy and Regulation Unit. Her opinion pieces and columns are extensively published in international and national platforms: Financial Express, Times of India, Hindustan Times, Hindu, Economic Times, and she also appears on many channels: India Today, BBC, Sputnik News, and Doordarshan. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science honors and master's degree in sociology and international development, and she is also a Commonwealth Scholar at the University of Bristol, United Kingdom. Welcome, Aparna. And at the ORF CFBP initiative, we are doing an anti-pollution initiative, which we both are working together as part of CFBP and ORF. So we'll be coming out with a compendium on that, and we're going to have some of the best people in the country writing articles on anti-pollution. So that is the way we are tackling anti-pollution, and hopefully it shall culminate within 2 or 3 months in Delhi, where some of the top secretaries and some of the top ministers will be coming and releasing a compendium. Aparna, look forward to that. And in as much as petite and diminutive she sounds, she's a powerhouse, as you will see when she talks. Sustainability runs at the back of her palm. And Aparna, if I make a mistake in moderating, please feel free to correct me. Honestly, I'm telling you, because your knowledge and your wealth of experiences, especially as far as the sustainability aspect from the environment perspective is concerned, is phenomenally brilliant. And now the fourth panelist is a very, very interesting panelist. I have added her to the academia section of the Council for Fair Business Practices. Her name is Insia Vanvati, and she's an independent Indian journalist, author, and commentator with an interest in the subjects of minority rights, media studies, hate politics, the social cost of polarization, as well as the critical examination of institutionalized human rights violations, particularly in religious, racial, caste, and gendered contexts. So, with this introduction, I think you can see to what level the debate is going to get heated up. Her columns have appeared in Indian Express, Al Jazeera, India Today, Hindustan Times, Asian Age, Deccan Chronicle, Asia Democracy Network, The Wire, and The Quint, amongst others. Her work on the themes of right-wing politics as well as the larger geopolitical implications of domestic political ideologies and policies have been published by think tanks and geopolitical analysis and advisory firms, including Stimson Center and Oxford Analytica. She also co-authors a fortnightly column with Hindustan Times. By the way, I kept reading every fortnight about 5-6 of her articles, and I said, I have to get in touch with this person, because this person does not just write for the sake of writing. This person imbues ethics in whatever she writes, and there is a lot of gravitas in everything that she writes, and she means what she says. She's not just playing it to the gallery, and that is what is most important. And through her writing, she examines power, language, ethics, democratic integrity, and the constitutional values India is founded upon. So, that's the reason, because I love the Constitution of India. I love comparative constitutions. I've done comparative constitutional studies when I did my master's at Georgetown. So I'm pretty much familiar with quite a few constitutions across the world. And, this is one of the reasons why I didn't see her on. And she's the author of The Fearless Judge, The Life and Times of Justice A.M. Ahmadi. Justice A.M. Ahmadi was the former Chief Justice of India, and she is a granddaughter. And that she also serves as a trustee of the Ahmadi Foundation, which is dedicated to preserving and furthering the legacy of his lordship and his commitment to justice, human rights, and legal excellence. Insia, could you please come on stage? A very warm welcome to Insia. And I think we'll begin our set of questions once I get on stage myself. and you will see, between me and Neha, we'll be alternating with the panelists, and I hope you'll enjoy. This is a completely different flavor. The primary one was the more basic one, the ethics and branding, and the very abstract talk that we had, imbued in with a lot of Jagdeep Kapoor's examples, and also one or two examples that Mr. Mistry gave us. And of course, Manish Kejriwal was I can say that now that the remaining three are not there, was an absolute class apart in a league of his own. But, obviously the remaining three are equal great stalwarts, but, his perspective was a little bit more broad in many of the things that he's come in, and is as brilliant an academic that he was, being a Baker Scholar and a summa cum laude from Dartmouth, and, from Harvard and Dartmouth respectively. So I think we'll start with that, and, I'll just get myself on stage. Thank you very much. I hope you'll enjoy this session. So I think my first question will go to Rajiv. Rajiv, you've been at the helm of your investment banking career, and you've, done some of the best deals in the country, and you're possibly the deal maker of the country, if I may say so, in terms of let his very humble personality. He's already taken Jagdeep Kapoor's saw the adage that he said he's always humble because he never tumbles. So my first question to you is sustainability reporting. We have a lot of these things coming out from investment banks, a lot of companies dishing out a lot many reports on ESG, this, that, and the other, and you see that. You rarely see anything on sustainability. Do you think that should be a mandatory reporting for the companies? I don't think the kind of leverage and the resources that the companies have, the juggernauts that they have, the juggernauts that they are, that it should be a problem to just ask someone that, hey, every year, why don't you just write some 15 pages or 20 pages on what we are doing? So what do you think? Your first views.
So let me just start by, if you permit me, I'll give you an instance 20 years back when environmental degradation was not as serious in our country as is possibly there today, and Delhi is an example. Bombay also is trying to catch up. See, we were trying to sell a chemicals company to BASF, and some discussions were taking place with BASF on the financials and market situation and cost comparisons, so on and so forth. And then they said that we should visit Ludwigshafen, which is the headquarters of BASF. And I'm sure many of you have had opportunity to go to Ludwigshafen. It runs by the side of the factory runs by the side of Rhine, maybe a couple of kilometers length by the bank of Rhine. And you need obviously you need a car to go around and see all the plants, and the plants over there were petrochemicals, acrylic acid, ammonia, of course, and a lot of sorts of heavy metals. So it's as, I would say, challenging as it can get in a chemicals plant. Having seen all the plants which took 2 or 3 hours, including, by the way, printer's ink, which is, go to the plant and you find all the doors filled with all the printer's ink, black color and all that. Then they took us to where the effluents meet the Rhine River. And that effluent plant, I remember, at the end of the plant was, you walked down to the river where the pipes are putting the effluent, and then there was a table kept with 2 or 3 glasses, and this man who took us said the water is potable, and he drank a glass from the Rhine River south of where the effluent met the river. So we asked him, Indians are always skeptical. We said, do the residents drink this water? Do they treat the water? He said the municipality treats the water for insurance. You don't need to treat the water. Now, this is one experience I had back in 2002, something like that. Company is well known, so I'm not naming that. If you look at China, this is an example of, let's say, Germany. Look at China. Many of you must have been to China. 2021 One, Beijing air was unbreathable. We all know that. You must have been several times to China, right? Unbreathable. What it is today is chalk and cheese, right? And what they did, particularly with regard to water, they have, by the way, approximately 180 cities with more than 10 lakh, 1 million population. I'm a little long-winded answer,
Right.
just to give you a sense.
Understand.
180 cities, more than 1 million, 10 lakh population, and many of these are sub-municipalities or very large cities, so we have really captured everything with more than 1 million. So let's say 180. Now, 2010 or 12, something like that, they had about 600 effluent treatment plants. All the urban areas which were throwing effluent into the river was effluent getting treated. Today, 2024, actually not today, 1.5 years back, the number of plants were 3,600 effluent treatment. The rivers have sprung back to life. So
Wow.
technology exists, is doable. And what they've also done is they have these people called the river officers, river managers, or river something or the other. They all given a length of the river. They measure the starting point, they measure the ending point with regard to BOD, COD, all those things. And you're responsible for, what goes out. And yes, what goes in is somebody else's responsibility, what goes out is your responsibility. So these river chiefs, I think they are called, if I'm not wrong, the system works very well. My third thing is, to answer President's question, is WAPI. You go to WAPI, the air gives the answer that it's called Daman Ganga River. Totally, there's no question of any life in that, full of heavy metals, and there's mercury, that is lead. The consequences this is, and not to forget Delhi. My last thing is with regard to, and here the real answer to what President asked me, this deal, the BSF says to us that, look, we brought you here just to tell you how seriously we take the environmental responsibilities. And now the question that we are telling you is, we will have to make sure that you guys comply with the environmental norms, and for all the past problems that you may have caused, you'll have to give us indemnities. And the owner of the company said, they're very revealing, he said, with regard to what you have to do with it in terms of capex and so on and so forth to make sure this company complies is your business. That is not coming out of my value, but I will give indemnities of unlimited amount. What that means is indemnities have no meaning in India, and that is the problem of enforceability, and that is the answer to whether you disclose, you don't disclose. Unless community gets involved, I think the situation cannot improve. The power that we sit in Delhi, the air, the water,
Right.
nothing has changed. It just gotten worse. So it's all a question of community getting involved. It's a question of involving bureaucracy, political leaders. That's the only way technology exists. It's a question of making sure that someone puts pressure on those who have to enforce the law to make sure that environment degradation is stopped and reversed.
Understood.
So my question is for Aparna now. India's growth story is accelerating alongside its climatic commitments. From your work on climate resilience and development, what does ethical sustainability mean in practice for businesses operating in emerging economies like India?
Yeah. Thank you so much, and thank you, Swapnil, for having me join online in this and become a part of this stellar panel. I don't work with businesses, so I'll please note that my opinions are very limited to the kind of work that we are somehow doing with the private sector counterparts and the kind of observation that I have mostly from the secondary research. But some very provocative and strong thoughts for us to move in a better direction, I would say. To begin with, I think for me, ethical sustainability in India is and cannot be a branding exercise, but it has to be a governance choice about who bears the risk and who receives opportunity in a warming economy. And I'll have very sharp thoughts for us to take away from here. First, I think it means businesses should internalize environmental and social externalities instead of outsourcing them to vulnerable communities, informal worker, or future generation. If a balance sheet looks healthy because ecological costs are invisible, that is, I think, not efficiency, it's sheer displacement. We see this tension often in a lot of heat-stressed areas and heat-stressed corridors around Delhi, where delivery timelines for works are optimized, but worker safety protocol lag behind a lot of rising wet bulb temperature. Secondly, I think ethical sustainability demands more time consistency. Capital allocation, procurement standards, and executive incentives are needed to be, or rather must, aligned with transition pathways that are more science-based and I think socially just. When Tata Power, for example, scales distributed solar and storage, it demonstrates that transition investments can be core strategy rather than just peripheral corporate social responsibility. But the ethical test, I think, lies in whether such investments are matched by tariffs, inclusive access, and resilient solar grid planning in smaller cities. Thirdly, I think it requires more geographic honesty, because operations in coastal and water-stressed regions, for example, must embed climate risk into their design, into their supply chain. Look at the floods in Chennai, right? They have repeatedly shown us that ignoring urban hydrology can convert climatic hazards into business losses and public suffering at a scale we can't imagine. Fourthly, I think when we talk about ethics, ethics is about voice and participation. Affected workers, vulnerable communities must have an agency in transition decisions that we make, whether it is about energy sourcing, whether it is about land use, whether it is about adaptation investments, because like I always say, my resilience is not your resilience. So a resilience is something, in simple terms, a coping capacity called resilience is something that cannot be imposed from top, right? Something in the name of resilience that's imposed from top is basically a maladaptation or resilience on the ground. So in terms of the gap between intent and implementation, I think it sits in three very uncomfortable places. That are first, measurement without accountability, it is disclosure without redistribution, and innovation without inclusion. So many firms that we might see measure emission, but yet underinvest in adaptation for ecosystem that secure their operation. Many disclose risk, but I've seen they have failed to reprice product to reflect their true cost. Many keep innovating and innovating in technology, but yet neglect the care economy and labor transition that make adaptation viable. So I think if sustainability is to be ethical, it must move from more narrative that we discussed to more materiality. It must move from reports to sheer contracts, from more pledges to action and procurement, and from more philanthropy to core business model.
Understood. I think, Aparna, that kind of sums up the entire narrative of this entire, session 2 that we are having, the way she's explored, the way she's expounded on it, and, very, very pinpointed thoughts and ideas you have, Aparna, as always. And Aparna tends to focus more on the doables rather than the talkables, if I may use that word. So my question to Shweta is that, catching on what she's trying to say, she's saying reports, talks, platform rhetoric, all fine. When it comes to implementation, when it comes to doing the things on the ground, she says ethics means basically the underprivileged should have a voice. She's put it in a very different way, but in a very, very appropriate way, in a very hard-hitting way, because ultimately if the privileged are the only ones who are going to have a voice, then that's not ethics. Then that's only sitting in ivory tower and saying that, oh, me, my and myself. And dare I say that CFBP used to be like that a couple of years ago. In its initial years, about 20, 30 years in its initial years, it was primarily, because in a way it was, and I don't blame the then founders and the then stalwarts, because, they had this within themselves that they could call anybody, including the Prime Minister of India, and say that the octroi needs to be abolished, because they had that kind of power, they had that kind of reputation, being JRD and Soli Godrej and Naval Tata and all of them. But thereafter, you need to make CFBP more accessible, because otherwise it would just end up being talk rather than actually doing things. So where do you think, in your perspective, are the corporates not doing enough? I would not use the word failing, because I think that's a very loose term and a negative term, and I don't have evidence to back that, but so I would rather use not doing enough, because from what Aparna is telling me is that there is not enough that is coming out from the corporate sphere except reports and things like that. I asked, Rajiv a question about that only reports and all that, but he'd give a very certain practical example to tell you that actually what needs to be done. So catching on what Aparna is saying, what is your view?
Shweta, I'll just add one statistic.
Sure.
If we all believe that chemical industry has a lot to answer for, the market cap of chemical industry in India is $250 billion plus, excluding Reliance, because they're in multiple businesses. So ability to spend and conform is very much there.
Understood. Got it.
Okay, I think that's all. Hi. So in terms of, and I think maybe I'll draw on a little bit of what we've heard so far, right? In terms of corporates not doing enough, and maybe it's a slightly different perspective that I'd like to bring here, if I may.
Absolutely, you must.
Yeah.
Aparna needs to be debated. She can't just win.
So, I think companies, first of all, I think, looking at India and directly comparing it with maybe certain other countries who are far ahead, the developed world, is not the right comparison, right? I'm not trying to take away responsibility or say that it's okay and, we'll focus on these things later. But I do understand and empathize with companies who are focusing primarily on growth, right? Because they do need growth and they do need the revenues to really build a stable business, to create jobs, and to be meaningful. Having said that, of course, and there is a balance, right, which I think we do tend to forget when there is a blind pursuit of capitalism. So maybe going slightly away from emission norms, which is, I think, it is a difficult topic, and I think the examples that Rajiv gave are really thought-provoking, right, in terms of what companies believe and what they actually end up doing, and what I think generally is a consensus in our country, which we really need to work on. But maybe moving slightly away from that, I'm proud of the companies that we have who are working on sustainability.
Right.
Whether it is in terms of supporting their employees or the communities, look at the Tata Group, for example, right? I mean, there are so many examples of how the group supports their employees, Tata Steel, for example, supports their employees. I mean, if an employee were to die before the age of 60, they would support their family, till the later years. So the reason I kind of digress is because I think there is a lot of good work happening as well, but couldn't echo more what Rajiv said about communities, and I think as a community we have a larger role to play in terms of keeping these companies more conscious of what they're doing, right? Social media, the power of social media, or the kind of brands that we heard about in the last session. Today the smallest of things can really gain, mass momentum,
Right.
If done the right way, right? So, you have examples of automakers. Why just India, right? You have examples of automakers like Volkswagen who eventually agreed that they did something wrong. But that just makes consumers more and more conscious of what they're consuming. Today's generation, and so many of them sitting in our audience today, are far more conscious of the choices they are making in terms of the environmental impact of the brands that they're consuming, and that makes brands more responsible. So it is, it is a bit hybrid, right? I mean, brands do want to make money, they do want to grow, but I think increasingly companies and brands recognize the importance of being environmentally and socially conscious for their consumer, for the long-term success, and overall to survive and to thrive.
Absolutely, I got it.
So I agree with what Shweta says, because as a brand owner, I understand the responsibility that you have in putting out the right thing and making sure while making the money, you're also being accountable for the ethics.
Why don't you just say for a minute about Yogati in relation to that?
So basically, I'm a founder of a brand called Yogati, which is a vegan, plant-based essential brand. So given the scenario of the dairy industry today, and I've been vegan for the last 9 years out of choice, and we thought we should come up with something that's more clean and not only for the environment, not only for your health, but in general for the society to kind of consume while maintaining their gut health. So I see a lot of people in my practice who are suffering with gut issues, hormonal imbalances, acne, skin issues. Okay, there's a huge rise in the cases of cancer and autoimmune conditions, and dairy has been one of the causative factors for these conditions.
Understood.
And after removing dairy, it has been, we see a lot of changes. We see a lot of remission happening at different levels in most of the health conditions. So this brand, basically Yogati, is a brand that makes cashew curd, which is clean, preservative-free, no chemicals, still has a 30-day shelf life, and we've just launched organic soy tofu. Because again, soy is GMO. In India, a lot of soy that you get comes from the US, and that has glyphosate and
So that's
GMO.
one concrete example of ethical sustainability right there.
Yeah.
And why don't you?
Yes, and now coming to INSEA. So INSEA, you speak a lot about intersection between ethics and institutional sustainability. Is that relationship being tested in today's climate of societal changes like polarization and communal tensions?
You know, Neha, many political commentators, myself included, we agree that the times that we are currently living in India, are the most polarized that we've ever seen before, with the exception of partition and perhaps also emergency. See, communal tensions were always a part of India, but we used to see them as eruptions, not like this steady, simmering state of hatred that we are noticing nowadays. Majoritarian ideas which used to be in the fringe have now come into the mainstream, and they've pushed minorities out even further into the margins. In fact, if you look at statistics, you'll find that vigilante violence has never been higher against minorities. And that means minority fear has never been higher. Now, why is this happening? Social fragmentation at this level and this scale is usually never organic. It's not accidental. It's usually driven by somebody who has something to gain from it. So that's why you will see communal tensions erupting right before elections. You'll see media debates on television fanning those flames, and you'll see social media also jumping into the fray. Now, when we frame narratives in this way, it reduces the space for dissent. And anybody with a contrarian view is not allowed to speak. Even journalists are not allowed to speak. Now, this makes for a very effective political condition because it mobilizes voters and it can win elections. But unfortunately, what it also does is undermine our institutions. And it affects how we respond to each other. Less as fellow citizens and more as adversaries. So how do we make sense of all of this? As a constitutional democracy, justice is foundational to us. We are a secular country, so our Bible, our Quran, our Gita, all of it is the Constitution. And the Constitution makes us certain promises. And these are not just abstract ideals. In fact, if you examine them carefully, you will find that it is actually an ethical blueprint. For example, you have equality to make sure that nobody is oppressed. You have dignity to make sure that you and I are not humiliated. You have life and liberty to make sure that rule of law always prevails. And fraternity. Fraternity, to my mind, is one of the most underrated constitutional values that we've been given. Because it teaches us how to coexist, how to respond to each other even if we disagree. So if you look at it from this lens, you'll find that it's actually an ethical document that's been given to us in a legal format. And when these promises become weakened is when you start seeing trouble. And at that time, the only thing that can stabilize society is the presence of ethically strong, sustainable institutions. In fact, I'll give you an example. Many of you must be following the Jeffrey Epstein case right now in the US. Right?
Yes.
Now, why do you think it's caused the kind of outrage that it has? Is it because of the nature of the crimes committed, or is it because of the names of the people involved? I would agree. I think also it's because of the names of the people involved. And the fact that after all of this evidence, there's been very little consequence. So that kind of gives you the sense that maybe the law is not equal for everybody, and that the Department of Justice is not to be trusted. In that moment, there is a breach of ethical contract between the citizen and the institution. And if people start to feel that, oh, it's very easy to break laws, then they will also start breaking laws. That's how impunity works. It flows from the top down. And I think this is what we are seeing in India, which is why we have the kind of lawlessness that we do. So the importance of strong, credible institutions cannot be overstated in a democracy.
Right. So I think what NCI is trying to tell us that, and this is more largely for the benefit of the students, is that sustainability is viewed, as I told you in my preliminary remarks, from a political, social, and economic perspective. So she is trying to weave in politics and sociology into the governance system which we have as a democratic polity that we are. The Constitution is the foundational document, the Magna Carta, the charter document of our country. It is holier than any of the religious textbooks that she mentioned, which is absolutely correct. And we have institutions that are democratic institutions that are symbols of governance, whether you call it the parliament, whether you call it the legislature, whether you call it the Supreme Court of India, and the high courts of the country, including other district courts, who are bounden to uphold the Constitution. Now, I completely understand from where she's coming from, but you see, this is one of the things that I always maintain, when I'm also on my debates, is that if I'm a doctor and I have a view which often the anchor also does, because he's an anchor or she's an anchor, and they have a certain pessimistic view of certain situations. So if I'm a doctor and I say that, something like cancer or something which is absolutely incurable and all that, I've actually killed the patient before I've actually treated the person. So looking at it from a very sensitive perspective that NCI is coming from, at the same time being a lawyer, I want to tell all the people in the country, whoever's listening to me here or wherever this is going to be relayed later on, is that the situation is absolutely not hunky-dory or rosy, but it is not as pessimistic or as cynical or as things that sometimes the media makes it out to be. You can spew bile, you can vent your spleen all you want on the media, which most people do during the debates, one way or the other. And I don't agree with that, because I always believe in a balanced perspective. I believe in an objective perspective of the situation. Her grandfather was one of the biggest constitutional functionaries that we've had. And many of his judgments reflected in the objectivity and the belief in the Constitution that we had. So I think what NCI is trying to tell us and inform us is that you need to work very passionately at ensuring that there is democracy in the institutions, that the institutions are not tainted with a sense of bias, with a sense of polarized views, with a sense of denigrating or the very people, whether you call them the minority, whether you call them the majority, because as basic human beings, as you pointed out, that there is a contract of justice between the institutions and between the individual and between the citizens of this country. And by the way, just for the knowledge of the people who are going to do the constitution, who are going to be lawyers in the future, or who have some interest in the law, the Article 14 of the Constitution, which promises equality, is not only for the citizens, it is also for the person who is not a citizen, because that's how it begins, that no person shall be deprived of equality before the law, except by a procedure established by the law, so, or equal opportunity. So, it's no person, it's not no citizen. So that's how the framers of our Constitution viewed it, that equality should be meant for everybody who comes in this country, whether that person is citizen of India, or even if a person who comes tomorrow as an expat or somebody like that, because not every one of us in the citizen is a country. Now, coming to the question that I want to ask Rajiv, I notice that whenever there are eco-friendly products, I feel that there are premium on that. There is a premium on eco-friendly products. Now, how ironical it is, and I'm going to bounce this off a little bit Aparna also later on a different question, which I have, but after Neha finishes the second question to Aparna. But Rajiv, how ironical it is that when you have eco-friendly product, you're charging a premium on that. Don't you think it's unethical to do that? When it's an eco-friendly product, you are saying that, okay, you're going to pay a premium on that, because if it's a cost is 100 rupees, I'm going to say charge you 150 because it's eco-premium, it's eco-friendly. I mean, I don't want to name the products because I'm not allowed to do that, or, I don't want to venture into that category, because, we've got a lot of industrialists who back us and things like that, but, the thing is, it's not appropriate for me, and I wouldn't do that either, any which ways. Don't you think it's, that the ethical perspective is totally lost in that? And I believe then the profitability takes superiority over the ethical part, or priority over that.
So let me just start by saying that as far as India is concerned, we can divide our industrial sector, sorry for this long-winded thing, but we can divide the sector into two parts. One is a very fragmented industrial sector, very competitive. It takes all the merit in the world and all the effort in the world to make any kind of a return on capital. And we have a lot of those kind of companies, the whole textile chain, the whole lending chain, the whole host of them. They fight on an hourly basis to make any return. At the same time, we have a sector which is generally tend to be brand oriented, which is very consolidated, very high returns, etc. I think what you are referring to is really the latter, which is brands which establish a kind of a rapport with the buyers and the premium results. Whether the premium is coming from being eco-friendly or not, I'm not that sure. But if it is, there's something very positive in this, because that means there's an audience and there's a set of the populace which says that I don't mind paying more for something which is compliant. At the end of the day, very, very, very heartwarming and heartening. The question is that if it is not something which, look, we know one thing, that certain category of products tend to be very high margin, beyond what is explicable by cost and all the supply demand and all those theories. And these are, we know they are beauty products and all that. There's the famous saying by Charles Revson, which I don't want to repeat here, but these are very high margin products. And look, if somebody were to come with a solution for, let's say, skin, and there's many products in the market today.
Exactly.
I think you must be knowing those, and our students would be knowing those, which claim to have plant origin, sell at a premium, and the offtake is, very, very encouraging. Now, that's the consumer behavior, and we should not come in the way of, the supply side at all, from the point of view of pricing freedom, but we should really make sure that there's enough, and I'm taking on my young friend's comment that she made, and I couldn't agree more with her on the overall context, and make sure that the total environment in the country, business and all that is such that the entry barriers are brought down, and ability of companies to come with supply goes up in various ways. She didn't talk in the economic context, but I'm saying it's ultimately the same thing, that more freedom and more equality is the answer. I'm happy if people are prepared to pay a premium, because for every seller there's a buyer. If buyers are paying a premium, and some of the youngsters are paying a premium. I mean, all power to them.
Understood, understood.
If I can just,
Sure.
add to that. And a very, a parallel to the financial services world, right? In Europe, companies are willing to pay a little bit more for an ESG-backed loan.
Correct.
Right? In
Right.
India, intuitively it doesn't feel right, and intuitively, and companies expect it to be priced a little better because they're doing something good. So I think, it's a journey. I think there's evolution there. But I agree with him. And it's also, when people buy or spend money, on something that is eco-friendly or environmentally friendly or sustainably sourced or plant-based, I think it's also putting your money where your mouth is, right?
Exactly.
So it's a great
exactly.
example of that.
No, that's right. In fact, that's the reason why I asked Rajiv, because I wanted his perspective on that. Because, see the way he completely shifted the conversation. So, he said that that's something, if there is a buyer for it, and if it's a willing buyer, at the end of the day, he's not going to castigate the seller and say that, "Yaar, tum chori kar rahe ho, you're fleecing me." Because, he'll say, "Okay, then don't buy it." It's as simple as that.
I would also like to add over here, one thing is what he rightly said, if there's a buyer who's ready to pay for the premium, that means he's ready to care for what he is investing his money in.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it's his health, his skin. And as a brand owner, I understand when, like a normal curd would cost $20, my curd costs $155 for 200 grams. That's not because we are making huge profits on one tub, but that's because our raw materials are clean, sourced ethically, and they are expensive.
Right.
Cashew is more expensive than normal milk, just an example.
Naturally.
And organic soy is more expensive than a GMO soy, which is mass produced. And besides that, also the packaging. So if you're intently doing packaging, it costs higher than the other cheap quality
Absolutely.
packaging. So it's not that you're paying a premium, the product costs increase when it is made or sourced ethically.
Correct. All right.
So Aparna, coming to you now, many companies now publish ESG commitments, but real transition requires systemic change, and we all are aware of that. So what role should businesses play beyond compliance in shaping just, resilient, and climate-aligned development pathways for cities and communities?
Yeah. Okay. Of course, I have to bring in a lot of jargons here to answer your question, but I think to begin with, I'll simplify this and say that I don't like the word compliance. Because when you're asked to comply, most of the thing that you submit as a part of your compliance report goes as just reporting, right? When you ask a business or any community to move beyond compliance, they become your co-architects or co-designers of development pathways rather than just passive rule takers, right? So they can reshape demand by committing to long-term, say, clean energy offtake, circular material, low carbon logistics, and create those investable signals that can de-risk transition infrastructure for the entire region. For example, when Mahindra & Mahindra, say, advanced electrification across segment, it did more than just selling vehicles. It pulls charging ecosystem, suppliers, and skills along with it. Second, I think that we can always embed just transition principles in workforce strategy by sort of reskilling the entire supply chain, by formalizing informal segments and investing in a lot of occupational health as we see climate risk intensifying. A resilient city at the end is not just only, say, powered by clean electrons, but they are the one that has to be protected and need to have productive people in that system. Thirdly, I think firms can partner with local governments on adaptation, whether it's school roofing, water stewardship, climate resilient buildings, because adaptation or resilience building is a public good with private returns. Initiatives by, say, ITC Limited on watershed restoration, climate smart agriculture have accurately showed us how supply chain resilience can be built when climate impact are most acute and we are faced with the most certainty that climate change brings with itself, that lies in its uncertain nature. Fourthly, I think we can reform finance by linking the cost of capital to more verified transition performance across subsidiaries, across suppliers, and not just at headquarters. And thereby they would be able to reward real change and penalize more cosmetic compliance, so to speak. If you look at large developers such as BLF Limited, you would see they can also mainstream your net zero ready buildings that lock in a lot of efficiency for decades to come in more rapidly urbanizing regions. And I think finally, there's a need for us in businesses to accept more of a normative role, to advocate more for stable, ambitious policy than just being in the level playing field. Even if it constrains your short-term advantage, ethical sustainability needs to be demonstrated when firms support rules that bind everyone, including themselves. And I think to this answer, the provocation I would like to leave here with is that if ultimately ESG norms remain a reporting function and a compliance, the question you asked, it will plateau, it will become a strategy function that sort of reallocates your power, capital, risk across value chain, and if it doesn't leave at that, it will transform development. The question that we must answer is not whether the businesses should lead or whether they should follow, but I think whether it is prepared even to be accountable for the development outcomes that its choice would reshape.
Aparna, before I leave you, I know you have to run, so I'll just ask you a final question. Do you think everything that you've said in terms of the environmental journey that we need to have, the resilient city building that we need to have, that the corporates need to do, the normative role that they need to adopt, you work at a cross-section on the intersection of the political and the economic sphere. You being possibly a part of possibly the best think tank in the country, and the largest one at that, the Observer Research Foundation. And I know what kind of work you all do. It's absolutely commendable and it's absolutely brilliant. And most basic qualifications of the people who are there are PhDs out there. So all these topics, they come like just on the back of your hand. Do you think a political environment, given the interaction that you have and the fact that you stay in Delhi, the political environment that we have is sufficient enough to promote these things within the corporate sphere, or it should be largely independent? I mean, it doesn't really matter what sort of political environment that we have in the country, which is obviously looking at Viksit Bharat at 2047. So it's definitely pro-business, pro-everything, pro-liberalization. But absent that, do you think that the corporates can do this on their own, and that is where they need to bolster up their conscience, or do you think that they will need that governmental push to do that?
I think it's both ways. Like I've said that, at the end of the day, political or leadership or sort of governance will give you a more, a kind of ecosystem where you can sort of thrive and bring in that positive change. All these major campaigns and jargons that we are looking at, major political campaigns, including the Viksit Bharat 2047, are all ecosystems that would sort of help you towards that purpose. We have started a lot around Invest UP and Invest States and all of that, where people are actually, kind of inviting a lot of those businesses to come in and invest, and they are very keen to hear on how they can do it hand in hand with sustainability and ethical practices, etc. But at the same time, I think that ultimately we are also a growing economy, right? So, there was one of this conversation here when one of my co-panelists was insisting that we have different growth trajectories, and India would need to grow if it has to have its hard and soft power and geopolitical ambitions, and for it to sort of hold the place of power in the global system. But at the end of the day, with yourself as a business. If I were a business and I'm sort of taking with myself an opportunity where I'm saying that I have innovated this technology, which would ensure that if I put up an industry here, my carbon emission would be captured at source, right? But sort of the pricing that I would need and the kind of help I would need is this. I think we still have today we see a political ecosystem where there would be support available. But at the same time, I would say that I was in Mumbai a couple of months ago, where one of this organization has hosted a lot of core businesses whose main problem was access to those political ecosystem. So while they have a lot of these fundamental principle ideas, innovation in hand, they can't reach sort of say the political powerhouse or the political power corridors to nudge them and tell them that this is what we are bringing to the table. I think that is still where these kind of silos and operational bottlenecks are the things that should be sort of broken and shattered for the governance and people and businesses to co-create solutions and to help scale those solutions up. They should not ideally remain with businesses. But at the same time, I think the question that you asked me, that while political systems are also giving us a lot of positive ecosystem right now, I think there's also a need, like I said, that businesses should move beyond the compliance and should start co-creating and sort of co-addressing the challenge. Until and unless the businesses start thinking like that, majority of innovations in terms of technology, measures, principles would not come to the table. If we just look at these sustainability adoption as a top-down compliance issue, so that should be bottom-up for businesses. So I think it should be both ways.
Lovely. Thank you, Aparna. You can exit if you want. And I thank Payal for suggesting your name, pushing me, in fact, that Aparna will have all these things at the back of her hand. So, great, Aparna, to have you, and look forward to working on the pollution project. Let's hope we can reduce a little bit of AQI in Delhi so that you can breathe a little better.
Let's hope that's happening, and thank you everyone, and I'm honored to share the stage with such a stellar panel and have really learned a lot. But thank you, and I look forward to
No, don't worry, we'll pick on your brain a lot more, don't worry about that. I absolutely harass all my advisory board members and all my EC members also. So, because, I get to learn a lot more, I'm a very selfish man. So, thank you, Aparna.
thank you.
Now, Shweta, my question to you, picking up on what she said, CSR activity 2%, okay, part of any corporate sphere. How about adding ESG as 1%, sustainability? Do you think corporates will indulge in that? Do you think they'll agree to that, or do you think they'll stop at 2% only, or they don't want more than 2%? Or do you think that between that 2% of CSR, they already weave in the ESG perspective? Do you think they do that? Or to be honest, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that they have this conscious slant towards that.
Well, I think corporates will definitely have a mixed view on this, right? But we should definitely push for, 1% ESG or whatever it takes. While I know Aparna's left, and I completely agree with her when she says that it shouldn't be about compliance and it should come from within. But sometimes, things begin that way, and things are, not exactly thrust upon, but, there are rules for a reason, right? That is what, that is how a lot of things start. So I think a 1% ESG, commitment or working in that direction. I know we have reporting standards in India now for the large listed companies, but maybe going beyond them.
Yes.
It's a journey, like I said, but going beyond them, having that intent would help, in my view.
Well, I think that should make a big difference. When you pump in 1% more, in addition to the 2%, I think that will make a big difference, because corporates can afford 1% more. The kind of book size that they have, I don't see much of a difference. It's it's like taking out to use the Hindi phrase, ek samandar mein se ek lota pani nikalo, kya farak padta hai? Because the kind of CSR activities, the kind of amount that they have to spend, and I don't want to name some of the corporates who are part of CFBP, who were the ones who founded it, I think, from whatever I know, because those figures are confidential to me, because they've told me about it, and this is not for a public platform, but I can tell you on any other day. But other than that, I think those are huge and they definitively more so go towards schooling and education and things, which is great actually. But I think on a lot of perspectives that Aparna mentioned, I mean, you could see that, in the way she was narrating, you could see a lot of angst in that. You could see the fact that there's not enough being done, and she's extremely passionate about these things, and she believes in she believes in deliverables. She doesn't believe in all this talk. Also, she gives a lot of talks and things like that, but she ends up coming out very hard, as some of our judges do on certain legal topics. They don't really care about what they want to talk, what's the audience is. Even if it's lawyers, they end up really making it like a kind of a courtroom there, with literally going hammer and tongs and things like that, and which is all healthy, which is all part of it. But I think from what you're saying is that they need to be pushed around, and I think Neha can ask.
So coming to INSEA now, you spoke about the media and the fact that it has come under some criticism for biased reporting. As someone who's been a part of the media industry for like many years, how do you assess its current state and its role in today's democracy?
So this is a very important aspect. The media is the fourth estate, which means that it has a democratic function. It's meant to hold to account the three arms of the government: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So at any point, if the media loses its integrity, it has a direct impact on the democracy. In fact, our constitutional right to freedom of expression flows from access to information, which the media is supposed to give us. It's also a very powerful institution in itself. It has the power to stabilize or destabilize society. So when the media reports in a manner that is careless or irresponsible, like it did during COVID, for example, you see it translate into violence on the streets immediately. We saw how the Muslim community was being vilified in those days during COVID, with false reports being floated saying that they were intentionally spreading COVID by spitting in food and all sorts of other ridiculous stories like that. Immediately we saw Muslim vegetable sellers being harassed, being beaten up, thrown out of societies. We saw young school children being harassed in their schools. So this is the power of the media. And language also plays an important role here. For example, in the US, whenever they have a terrorist attack, if it's classified as a terrorist attack, it immediately brings to mind this image of a Middle Eastern Muslim man. But if the act was committed by a white individual, then they don't use the word terrorist. Then they'll say something like, oh, he was a disturbed individual. Or they'll say, oh, he was a lone wolf operating all by himself. Right? So this kind of patterns we see in Indian media as well. We see words like anti-national, we see words like jihadi, urban naxal. These are all inflammatory words that are designed to incite passions amongst masses. Now, this is unfortunately where I think the Indian media is at the moment. Media ethics and press freedoms have suffered over the past 2 decades. In fact, many of you would have heard other public intellectuals speaking about the current times that we live in terms of press freedoms, comparing it to the emergency era, which is not a flattering comparison at all.
True.
And so, I mean, these things have happened for several reasons, of course, but which I won't get into right now because that's a whole separate conversation. But I do think that it is time for the media to now accept that maybe certain mistakes have been made and also reclaim its role as a truth teller. Because editorial and journalistic courage means that you must have the courage to stand up to pressures. And I think we also need to discourage this trend of breaking news. Because it's become so tempting for journalists to be the first one to break a story that they are no longer verifying stories, which is why we find so many false reports. We see fake news and we see all of these things that are clouding our feeds. And as audiences, we also need to be aware that these are the dynamics that are operating. So when we consume news, we should be asking these questions as well. Like, who does this narrative harm? Who does this narrative benefit? At the end of the day, accurate information is a public commodity. And as citizens, as participants in our democracy, we have every right to demand that we get accurate information. So I think this is something that we can possibly be doing.
So, for the benefit of the students, since it's, basically what we are talking about is administrative law and, the democratic polity as to how it works in a parliamentary democracy like ours. She's pointing out that the freedom of press is a very sacrosanct freedom guaranteed under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution, which is freedom of speech and expression. And as Justice Hugo Black said in the Pentagon Papers case, that freedom of press is for the governed, not for those who govern. So basically what she's trying to say is that the media has to come out and inform the people, because right to information is a fundamental right which imbues from Article 19(1)(a), which is the freedom of speech and expression. If I have the freedom of speech, you have the freedom to accept, you have the right to know what I have to say, and you have the right to disagree also. So that can happen only when you have a right to information. So you have the RTI Act and things like that. So she's pointing out significantly to the role that the media has to play in ensuring a sustainable democracy. Because democracy, if you look at the legal philosophers who pointed out as to why democracy was the least, or should I say the least brutal of all democracies, is because it gives the right to the people to make a decision. That's what Magna Carta was all about 700, 800 years ago. And that is the reason why the British Constitution is not written. It's interspersed in various statutes in the country, and those are the most liberal democracies of the world, alongside the United States, which is definitely a great liberal democracy, but at the same time it is a presidential form of government with a great amount of check and balance that they have. In fact, one of the presidents called up Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. I don't want to name the president, and he said that let's have a hotline with the White House. So the Chief Justice of that Supreme Court at that time had the courage and the temerity to say that the Supreme Court of the United States does not work at the majesty of the president, and kept the phone down. Now I want to know how many leaders of democracies in this country have the courage to do that, to tell the Prime Minister or the President of the country, and much less the President of the United States, even in today's day and age, to say that. Now that required a great amount of integrity. So likewise, you have Bob Woodward, who was the Washington Post journalist, along with another colleague of his, when they discovered the scandal of, I don't remember the name of the president, Nixon, Watergate scandal, Richard Nixon, they went hammer and tongs to ensure that he has to forfeit his presidency. So that is the level of freedom of press. And it's very difficult to find that kind of conscientious editors at that time. There are, I'm not saying that there aren't, there are across the country, and that's the reason why democracies across the world have been sustained. But be that as it may, what we are talking about is Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein were the two editors and who ensured that President Nixon has to step down because of the Watergate scandal. And Nixon was a very ambitious man, by the way, Rajiv, and there was this great law firm, and there still is a great law firm by the name of Sullivan and Cromwell, which does some of the best M&A deals across the country, across the world. And some 50, 60 years ago, there was a student from Duke Law School who applied to get a job in Sullivan and Cromwell. And Sullivan and Cromwell rejected him because of his resume. Now that Duke Law School student was Richard Nixon. So, the man was extremely ambitious, and Sullivan and Cromwell probably to this day, barring the Watergate scandal, still kicks itself for not having the President of the United States as one of its most prestigious alumni. We at Georgetown had Bill Clinton as our alumnus, minus his one weakness that he had that I think everyone world knows about. He was a brilliant president with a lot of political heft and things like that. So coming to Insia's point, after that a little bit of digression, I think what she's trying to say is that to have a sustainable democracy, you must have a very, very responsible media. And especially when you watch debates in the night, at times, yes, they tend to get carried away themselves, but that is some mistake which at times cannot be pardoned. You have to rectify yourself, you have to control yourself, and you have to present a balanced view. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen. But for the most part, I think there are people like her who write on the mainstream media, in the newspapers, who try to rectify that wrong by saying, and that's the reason why we have her on our team, because we have a conscientious person amongst us. I may not agree with everything that she has to say, but then democracy is all about having the ability and the patience to let the person speak whose ideas you abhor the most. So, that's what it is all about. And I think with that, we'll just pass around all the three of our panelists, Neha, their concluding thoughts, with very short thoughts. We'll start with Insia on very short ethics and sustainability, how far we've come and how far we need to go. We meaning, I mean, not only as a citizenry, but even as corporates, as politics, as individuals. And, depending upon what your expertise is, you will say on that, Raji will say on that.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about who I think is the most important stakeholder in all of this. To my mind, it's the next generation. Those who either don't yet have a voice or are not yet born. They cannot vote, they cannot fund public campaigns, they cannot drag us to court. So in policy, they don't matter. They will inherit all the decisions that we make.
True, very true.
Which places a moral and ethical burden on us, because they won't get to choose the kind of institutions that they inherit, just as we didn't get to choose the ones that we received. And I think this is the most beautiful part of ethics and governance, and also the most important part, because it forces us to think of the well-being of those who ironically cannot force us to think about them. And I think this is the ethical conundrum of our generation, and of course of every other generation.
Shweta.
So I'd like to sum it up in two messages, right? And this is, I think, from the previous panel as much as ours. And we heard this often, right? Short-term versus long-term. So I think it would do us all good to remember the long-term, the longer-term purpose, why we're all here, why we're doing what we're doing, what we intend to contribute to the society, over the shorter-term gains or profits or, anything else. I think that aligns well with NCR's message as well, because when we look about or think about the long-term, we do factor in the next generation or generations to come as well. And I think the second message is something I read somewhere, which says there is no planet B, and planet A is already in back order. So keep that in mind in every choice that you make. Thank you.
Rajiv, we'll close with you.
I'll be quick. I think when given our country, given our water, air, everything, we think a lot about, from a sustainability point of view, we think a lot about environment. First of all, in Syria, thank you for bringing the G part of it into the limelight. Governance matters, democracy matters. You are pretty right. And the second thing I'd like to say is, from the point of view of the organization headed by our president, I would say no one organization can do everything. The young matter a lot, undoubtedly. But I think there has to be some cooperation between three sets of people. One is those who can mobilize the intelligentsia, which is CFBP. The second is those who have the scientific tools at their hand to be able to measure and really inform. And the third is those who organize the community. If these three sets of people come together, you'll see a lot of results in sustainability. My last point, unrelated to your question, is when we think of journalistic courage, we should of course keep Mr. Ramnath Goenka in mind.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Equally, apart from Bernstein and Woodward,
yes,
not to forget Judith Miller, who chose to go to jail in Syria, then to reveal her source. So I think journalistic character is not unknown to India. I totally agree with what she's been saying on the electronic media, but I think the print side,
yes,
people have shown character repeatedly, and God save them, God help them.
Absolutely. Neha, you want to give your final thoughts and then I'll close. You want to have final thoughts on this, on sustainability and ethics? Anything you want to say from the,
I think I've
anything?
learned a lot from all our esteemed panelists and from their wealth of experience and knowledge that they've collected over the years of working in their space and their fields. But I feel I really agree with what Inzia and Shweta have to say. We really owe it to our next generation. We are the torchbearers. We have to make sure that what we do today makes their future and makes their life better. And we need to start working in that direction ASAP, because we're really in trouble already right now. So.
Right. So I think I'll end this with what I learned from my late father. And this is all for the young generation that we are going to be the future GMs, VPs, the proud journalists or the proud op-ed writers and things like that, is my father used to read a lot, and he imbued the art of reading or the hobby of reading in me. And, he was a very, very distinguished lawyer himself. And, he told me, he used to quote a lot of philosophers and things like that to me, like Aristotle and Plato and all that. So, and he remembered some of those things. So he told me that a wise man learns much more from a foolish question than a fool learns from a wise answer. So I asked him, who was it? Was it Aristotle? He said, no, it was Bruce Lee. So thank you very much. We'll end that. And I'll ask my team to felicitate with all the things. Sonu, why don't you come up on stage? Payal, why don't you come up on stage too? Jalpa, why don't you come up on stage also? And we'll felicitate all our speakers. Asha, you want to come up on stage to felicitate our speakers? Please. Thank you very much, and we'll all please join us for lunch. And I thank all my sponsors, the Tata Group, for presenting this seminar, to VIP Industries for powering this, and for Unload and PN Gadgil to support us. Thank you very much, and please join us for lunch. I hope you all enjoyed it. Any questions, any Q&A, you can just ask the panelists if they're there outside during lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please have lunch.
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Let's have lunch.
Just to conclude the panel.